Good evening. Hello, welcome to another session of our CEO, Catholic Evangelization Outreach Series. I think I represent our CEO team, and they're just a group of wonderful, dedicated parishioners who've done a great job of getting a lineup of very powerful speakers this season for us to hear. And these speakers have done such a great job of sharing their story, their faith story, which in essence is sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, which I love because it allows all of us to kind of develop a closer relationship with God and really have some time to reflect on our own lives and be thankful for, all the blessings that we have. So we're so happy that you're here with us this evening. So it's my pleasure to get to introduce our speaker tonight, who is Paul Sherman. And Paul was raised here in Louisville, Kentucky. And what Paul told me is we're going to hear a lot of his biography in his talk tonight, but we did want to highlight a few important items here. The first one that I'm going to start with, I think, is the most important, at least in Paul's notes to me. He said he is married to Susan, who is the best thing in his life. And Paul says that Susan loves him despite all of his many faults. And I know Susan thinks that she's a doll, so we love you so much. Thanks for being here, Susan. Paul and Susan have 4 children, which he says is the second best thing in his life, and 4 grandchildren. And number 4, I've learned, was just born this week. Is that right? 1 week ago today, so welcome. Okay, so wonderful. Paul has retired from orthopedic surgery after 26 years of practice. He's been a member here at St. Margaret Mary since 1985. And Paul has coached basketball, both boys and girls, for about 30 years. And during that time of his coaching, the teams won 4 city championships and 4 runner-ups, so it's a pretty impressive record. Paul has been a member of the parish council twice, and he has taught baptism preparation classes for several years. And in his spare time, which doesn't sound like there's much of it with what you had going on there, but in your spare time, Paul loves to read. He loves to ride his bicycle with family and friends, do handyman repairs, volunteer at supplies overseas, and my favorite, take naps. Also, another favorite of mine, he loves chocolate chip cookies, but please no nuts. And lastly, Paul was honored by the Notre Dame Club of Greater Louisville as the 2017 Person of the Year, which I think sounds like quite an honor. So let's please give a warm welcome to Paul Sherman as he shares his story on listening to the song of the Spirit. Let's welcome Paul.
Thank you, Lisa. About 3 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night. It was about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. It was winter, so obviously it was cold outside, and it was obviously also dark. As I tried to go back to sleep, I started saying some prayers. These were different from my usual prayers. Usually I pray to Jesus, or sometimes I ask Mary or one of my favorite saints to help me. Sometimes I ask the Holy Spirit for guidance, but this time I was praying directly to the Father. And I was complaining. I said something like, "Why haven't you answered me? I try to do what you want. I know it's your will be done, but you said to ask, and I'm asking. I don't know if you even hear me. I'm not asking for much. Can't you give me just one sign that you even hear me? Would that be so hard? Come on, what's the problem?" Maybe you have said similar things like that yourself, but at the moment those thoughts finished crossing my mind, at that very instant, a bird began singing outside my bedroom window. Now, I know there are birds that sing at night, but not many. And the timing was too incredible to be anything but to be a coincidence. I thought, whoa, I better not talk to God like that. He hears everything. About a year ago, About a year ago, Lou Starr asked if I would consider giving a CEO talk. I told her that I didn't think I had much of a story and asked her, what do you want me to say? She said to just tell my journey of faith story. I mentioned this to Donna Lang, who asked if I'd ever had a crisis of my faith. I said, no, not really. My faith has been pretty simple, pretty straightforward, lots of blacks and whites in my life, very Baltimore catechism, that's when I was brought up, and probably naive. No bolts of lightning had struck me. I had had no visions of Mary or any angels, even though I believe in angels. Nothing that could be called an official miracle, at least not by the Catholic Church. But I believe I've witnessed miracles, as I'm sure some of you have too. One of them was last week. I just didn't think I had much of a story. Donna said, oh, I think you have a story. You just haven't figured it out yet. Well, I know I'm often clueless, and it sometimes takes me a while to put two and two together. Just ask my family. But I took that as a challenge, so I started thinking, what is my story? I don't know about you, but when I come to talks like this, I come hoping that I might hear something that will help me with my faith, something that will confirm what I believe. So what can I possibly say that might help you? As I thought about this, I finally remembered something one of my very good friends said. Father John Dietrich once told me, if his homily touched even one person, even only one person, he thought it was a success. So I decided I didn't need to worry too much about what I said. I decided to tell you about how I became a doctor, how that is my journey of faith, where it has led me, and hope that somewhere in that, at least one of you gets something out of it. I need to start a little bit at the beginning because I think it might help you to understand where some of those building blocks for my faith started. I was born on June 4th, 1950 at St. Joseph Infirmary. 1 week later, I was baptized at our Mother of Sorrows Church, which was just across Eastern Parkway from the hospital. So that's when my faith journey began. I was the youngest of 5 children. There were 3 girls and 2 boys. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. My father was a sheet metal worker. We did say the family rosary every night at 6 o'clock and went to the 7 o'clock Mass every Sunday morning. Yep, 7 a.m., and we sat in the front pew. So I guess we were a pretty Catholic family. But I still consider myself a very average person. Ursuline nuns taught me for all 8 years. In the 2nd grade, I received the sacraments of penance and Holy Communion. A few years later, confirmation. In the 5th grade, I became an altar boy and began singing in the class choir. All, again, very standard stuff for a boy in my parish. I didn't like the choir too much, but I loved being an altar boy. I loved learning about the traditions of our faith, knowing the Latin responses, learning what to do during the different liturgies, swinging the censer of Friday novenas to the Sorrowful Mother. I really liked that. And riding my bike to church, even when I was scheduled to serve the 6 o'clock morning Mass. Now, everyone who was ever an altar boy has stories, and so do I. There are 2 I want to tell you about because I still think about them sometimes. Our parish sent one boy to the hospital to serve Mass in their chapel every day. It was great. We got to do everything by ourselves, from lighting the candles, preparing the cruets, giving the Latin responses, moving the book from one side of the altar to the other, ringing the chimes, and turning over the communion cloth. Who remembers the communion cloth? At least a few of you do. And holding the paten under your chin. I actually caught the Eucharist once. I had always thought it would hit the paten, bounce off, hit the floor, and then I would be blamed. But I caught it, and it was great, and I loved serving Mass at St. Joe's. One day I was running a little late and hustling down the hall. The hallway going into the chapel took a 90-degree left turn, and since I was late, I cut the corner short, and I ran right into Archbishop Flourish. I mean, I almost decked him. Apparently he was a patient and had just finished saying his morning prayers or celebrating a private Mass. He was old and frail, and I almost flattened him. I don't know who was more shocked, but I knew immediately that if he didn't know who I was, he couldn't excommunicate me. So I did a quick sidestep around him and disappeared into the chapel. That was my first run-in with the hierarchy of the church, and it wouldn't be my last. On the other occasion, I was actually early. As I went into the chapel, a priest was starting to say Mass on one of the small side altars. I quickly dressed and went out to help. When he was finished, I prepared the main altar and served the second Mass. Afterwards, the nun who was sacristan told me the first priest was grateful for my help and asked her to thank me. He apparently had never said a Mass by himself before and wasn't really sure how to do it. I thought that was a little strange. She asked if I knew who he was. No, sister. That was Thomas Merton, as if I knew who that was. He's a monk at Gethsemane, as if that would help me know him. He writes a lot of spiritual books. Okay. Finally, she said, just remember his name for when you get older. So I served Mass for Thomas Merton. I'm hoping he gets canonized, and if he still wants to help me, maybe he'll put in a good word for me as St. Thomas Merton. For my Mother of Sorrows, I went to St. X and was taught by mostly Xaverian brothers, a few lay people. A very routine 4 years, no spiritual awakenings. Then I was fortunate enough to go to Notre Dame. Some of my Notre Dame colleagues are here. That was before it was co-ed, and to put it in perspective, that was also before you needed at least a 1350 on your SATs to be considered. While Notre Dame is a wonderful place, it's far from perfect. I actually heard a mother say once, Notre Dame is the closest thing to heaven on earth. With all respect to her, and even to Father Miles, that's just not true. They could never have been there in November, December, January, or February. It's bitter cold, windy, snows all the time, and the sun disappears for those 4 months. That's not my idea of heaven. However, Notre Dame is great for other reasons, one of which is the Catholic traditions. Yes. And as I said, I like traditions. Our Catholic faith is everywhere. It's not pushed on you by any means, but I think you just absorb some of it by being there. I did not take full advantage of that, however. I did go to late-night dorm masses fairly often, and sometimes visited the grotto, which I will tell you more about in a minute. There are some Notre Dame traditions that still mean a lot to me, even now. You may know of them, but I'm going to tell you about them anyway. First, there are 3 famous buildings on campus. The administration building, that's the Golden Dome with the statue of Mary at the top. The Hesburgh Library, which has a mosaic of Touchdown Jesus on the front. And the Basilica of the Sacred Heart, which is a beautiful Gothic church. You've probably seen them on TV. Many people believe the library is the highest building on campus because it's so massive. But if you go to the top floor and look out across campus, the statue of Mary on the dome is higher, by 10 feet. That's pretty cool, especially considering the place is named after her. But the cross on the steeple, just beyond the dome, is higher than her by 5 more feet. Nothing on campus is allowed to ever be higher than that cross. I think that's a great sign that Christ and the cross should be first in my life. I may not always put them there, but they should be. Another tradition is the grotto. This is an outdoor replica of the grotto at Lourdes, where, as you know, the Blessed Virgin appeared. It is probably the most visited site on campus and certainly the most sacred. You go there to pray or meditate or just to get away from your problems for a little while. If you wish, you can light a candle for your intention. Thousands of candles are lit by visitors on football weekends, and another 1,000 are lit by students during exam week. You can even have one lit for free at an online website, which is on your handout, and it's free. But the remarkable thing is to watch the people come and go, some pausing for just a few seconds to say a short prayer, and see the respect and reverence they show for the place. It seems like there is always someone there. It can be 10 degrees, snowing, and someone is there. Our son Andrew told me once he had been there at 3:30 in the morning. He said someone was there when he arrived and someone else came before he left. Everyone is quiet, more quiet than in most churches. I saw Dick Vitale there once, and even he was quiet, and that's a miracle. As you enter to light your candle, there are 2 rocks cemented into the stones. These rocks are from Lourdes. Everyone bows their head, touches the rocks, and says a small prayer before lighting their candles. I still get filled with emotion thinking about it. It gives me a tremendous sense of comfort and peace, knowing so many other people from around the country, indeed from around the world, share my faith. Even now, when I have a problem, I think, I need to go to the grotto. The president of the university was Father Theodore Hesburgh, Father Ted. He was a remarkable man, and I highly recommend his autobiography, God, Country, Notre Dame, to you. I only met him a few times, but he still taught me some very important lessons. One was that the leaders of the church could make mistakes and be wrong, at least about things that were not doctrine. And you should stand up and say something about it. Really, I learned this because of Father Hesburgh. Let me explain. One year, the university was hosting an international conference on the world population explosion and problems as a result of it. This was brought about by the famine in Biafra, which of course you know is in Africa. There are many topics to be discussed, and one was population control. You know, birth control. The Bishop of Fort Wayne published a scathing letter saying that Notre Dame should not be discussing this topic because it was against the teaching of the Catholic Church. He was very critical of the university and of Father Hesburgh for allowing it. He went so far as to question our Catholic identity. Now, Father Ted liked a good fight, and it certainly didn't hurt that he knew the Pope's private phone number. He really did. He responded that the university was not supporting birth control, and that it had an academic, ethical, and moral responsibility to discuss any and all topics, even those opposed to the teachings of the Church, as long as it was done in an open, honest, intellectual, and rational way. He went on to say, how else can we expect to change someone else's belief if we won't discuss our differences? If we can't change their opinion, they might at least learn a little bit about what we believe. He basically told the bishop to mind his own business and that he, Father Hesburgh, would mind the business of the university. As you can imagine, the students went crazy. Father Hesburgh, our president, had stood up to the bishop. Now, this was a revelation to me. I had been brought up believing that nuns, priests, bishops, and so on were never wrong. You certainly never contradicted them in public. But in a strange way, this also taught me that in spite of what others say and do, even a bishop, no one gives me my faith. Ultimately, it comes from within me. Faith is, after all, a choice. I graduated in 1972, came home, got a job, and started working. I also started coaching grade school basketball, as you heard, but that's a completely another story. After about 2 years, I was unhappy with the direction of my life. Something had to change, but I didn't know what. I was still going to church, still saying my prayers, still had my faith. This wasn't about my faith. But this definitely was a turning point in my life. One day I sat on my front porch and had a long talk with myself. Really. I asked myself a lot of very difficult questions. What did I want to do? I don't know. What did I want to be? Don't know that either. What did I like? Okay, I had a few answers for that question. What did I not like? I had a few more answers. What were my strengths and what were my weaknesses? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Eventually, what gifts had God given me and how could I use them? For some reason, throwing God's name into that question made it a little bit harder to answer. 100 questions went through my mind. Did I want to be an accountant? No, not really. How about a lawyer? Certainly not. Did I want to work in an office? Well, that sounded okay, but I'd like to get out of the office some. Did I want to work with people? That sounded pretty good. Finally, how about being a doctor? Whoa, hold on. Where did that come from? That question really scared me. I mean, really. I had never, ever thought about being a doctor in my life before, and no one had ever told me I could. For 3 years, my roommate at Notre Dame was a pre-med major named John. Every year I told John he was crazy for wanting to be a doctor. Why do you want to study so hard? Take it easy. Have some fun. There's easier ways to make a living. And now I was asking myself if I also wanted to be a doctor. There were many other reasons this frightened me too. First, I had always hated school. School was something I had to do, and that's why I did it. Now I'm thinking about another 8 to 10 years. I would need to go back and pick up my pre-med requirements first, and that would add at least 2 more years. There would be no guarantees I would be accepted. My GPA wasn't that great, certainly not by med school standards, and I would need to do well on the medical college admissions test. Finally, this would all cost something, and guess what? I didn't have any money. Except for serving Mass at St. Joe's, I'd only been in the hospital 3 times, twice to get some stitches, and once to visit my grandmother. I knew absolutely nothing about medicine or about being a doctor. What was I getting myself into? I asked for advice from lots of people, some here in Louisville and others back up at Notre Dame, where, of course, I visited the grotto. I found that Kentucky, for many reasons, was one of the best states in which to live for someone in my position. This started to look possible. I quit the job I had and started working as an orderly in what was then called Corsair Crippled Children's Hospital to learn a little bit about medicine firsthand and also to make my application look a little better. I met a nurse named Denise. Some of you probably thought I was going to say Susan, but it was Denise, and we started dating. It wasn't long before Denise told me she had always wanted to join the Peace Corps and go to Africa. Hear that? Africa a second time. Go to Africa. Why in the world do you want to do that? Well, the Peace Corps didn't accept her, but another organization did, and she made plans to go to Malawi for a year. This wasn't exactly a dating setback for me because by this time, a cuter nurse named Susan had started working there. I started dating Susan too. I told you that sometimes it takes me a while to figure things out. Well, after the first date, I thought maybe, and after the second date, I knew. She was the one. My problem now was I had to convince her. I did, and 3 years later we were married, and by that time I was in med school and decided to be an orthopedic surgeon. Let me quickly tell you a little bit about surgeons, maybe a little bit more about me as a surgeon. Surgeons all have an abundance of confidence. Some of us would say an overabundance. But would you really want someone operating on you if they weren't sure they could get the job done? Orthopedics also is not known for being a gentle surgery. We do some very physical procedures. My longtime partner, Carol Witten, often said, if people only knew what we really did to them, they wouldn't let us do it. In surgery, we talk about having good hands. Because of that long talk I'd had with myself on my front porch, I knew my hands were one of the talents God had given me. And that is why I had such good confidence. I knew he was with me in the OR. Did I ever pray before surgery? No, because I already believed he was with me. Back to my story. Susan and I had 4 children, Beth, Andrew, Jenna, and Kathy. There were good and bad times, happy and sad times, successful and unsuccessful times. We were blessed in many, many ways, more ways than I can possibly count. However, my faith during this time was very routine and run-of-the-mill, and I was okay with that. I felt that if I did what was required, that would be enough. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a few years. It's 2010. Susan and I met a man named Steve James. Steve is the founder of an organization named Kenya Relief. His story is incredible and heart-wrenching because it includes the death of his only daughter, Brittany. We don't have time for that now. He asked us to go on a surgical mission to the orphanage and clinic he had built in Migori, Kenya. Okay, Africa, a third time. He told us how desperately poor the people were, how scarce medical treatment was, how much our help was really needed, and how we would make a difference. After all, don't we all want to be the one to make a difference? Steve said there had never been an orthopedic surgeon on a team and that there would be plenty of work for me. He promised to take very good care of us, and finally, when our clinic was over, we would go on safari and see the animals. He promised we would see lions. He had cast the hook, set it, and now he just reeled me in. I wanted to see the animals. A few months later, we were in Kenya. Our trip was incredible in every sense of the word. We came home talking about how beautiful Kenya is, how inspirational the other missionaries we met were, and how appreciative the Kenyan people were. Even when we couldn't help them, which was often, they still thanked us for coming and frequently said, "Thank you for helping my people." Finally, we talked about how great it felt to know we did make a difference in their lives. However, there was an unexpected side effect. They made a difference in ours too. They showed us how much faith and trust they had in us, complete and total strangers, people they would never ever see again, and in God. I think that's when my faith jumped up a notch. I overheard one patient, a woman, who had had a hysterectomy, tell her gynecologist, "I don't have anything to give you, but I will pray for you the rest of my life. I can guarantee you that's the only time in my life I wished I had been a gynecologist." For some reason, I think her prayers may mean more. We could spend hours telling you stories like this. Also, I must say the safari did not let me down. The best word I know to describe the animals is majestic. Being within 10 feet of a pride of lions, giraffes, a leopard, or within 50 feet of a herd of elephants with their babies, multiple, and a field of probably 200 zebra, or any of God's other animals is something I still have trouble believing. I felt like I was witnessing God's miracle of creation right before me. We have gone to Kenya 7 times, but our return home in 2014 was very disappointing. The Ebola outbreak was in West Africa that year, 3,000 miles from us in Kenya. Africa is really big, and 3,000 miles is really far, especially in third world countries. We found out that Susan was temporarily suspended from teaching religion here at St. Margaret Mary, and that the parish had been informed before us. We were told we might have caught Ebola in the airport. Yep, that's what was said. You might have caught it in the airport. Unbelievable. When Susan asked, "Well, are we still welcome here for Mass?" the response from the parish leaders was complete silence. They didn't even answer. Imagine, how would that make you feel? When we came to church, some people moved away from us. When we asked for a meeting with the parish council, we were told no. We offered to give an educational talk about Ebola, but were again told no. There was much more that happened that I won't go into. We felt that fear and ignorance had caused our church to abandon us. We had our faith, but needless to say, it was difficult. How could we possibly explain what was happening, especially to our non-Catholic friends? There were a few people who were sympathetic. 2 particularly stand out to me. Marge Borders made a point to sit right next to me at Mass. My cousin Mary V gave me a big hug in the vestibule. She told me how glad she was to see me here and that this was where I should be. I know she meant St. Margaret Mary, but in another sense, I think she meant the Catholic Church. Sometimes simple kindness can sure mean a lot. Those two and a few others became my church, my shepherds. If not for them, I might not be here tonight. Others, usually strangers, called or wrote letters giving us words of encouragement. One of my former basketball players called from Texas and asked, "Coach, what in the world's going on out there?" It had been 25 years since I had coached him. Two priests who had also been to Kenya asked to meet us and share our stories. Father John Judy and Christ the King Parish invited us to attend Mass with them. We were welcomed with open arms and hugs by most, if not all, of the parish. These also became part of my church. This period was without doubt the biggest challenge I ever had to my faith. I didn't lose my faith. It would have been easy to start going to Southeast Christian or some other church. What I had learned at Notre Dame and from those I respect the most, my family and friends, my teachers at our Mother of Sorrows and St. X, Father Dietrich, Father Hesberg, the Kenyan patients, and yes, even the visitors to the grotto, helped keep me Catholic. A year later, in 2015, we returned to Kenya once again. I had been retired for a couple of years by this time. While touring the new school Kenya Relief had built, we were introduced to a little girl named Cynthia. Her picture's on the handout. She was about 10 or 11 and was competing in the district singing competition that afternoon. She sang for us. This old man, he played one. You know the rest of the words, and I am not going to sing it for you. You're welcome. Thank you, sister. But she won the competition. 2 days later, Cynthia was brought to the clinic. They thought she might have broken her forearm but did not have x-rays. When I saw her, there was no might about it. Her forearm was definitely broken. I did not need x-rays. I knew it was a simple fracture, but I also knew there was a big catch. Her type of fracture is called a green stick fracture. This is unique to children. Her bones had only broken part way through, like a green stick. The catch is that the bones must be broken the rest of the way before they are straightened and put in a cast. If you don't hear and feel them crack, you haven't completed the fractures. They will then heal crooked and, like many of the patients we see in Kenya, she would be left permanently handicapped. As a rule, medical treatment is just not available there. We took her to the operating room and gave her an anesthetic. I manipulated her arm until the bones popped. I reduced her fracture and put her arm in a cast. Now, people like to watch when you do this sort of thing, so there were a lot of people crowded into the OR. They all cringed and shuddered when they heard the bones pop. However, while I was very pleased with myself, I was much more proud of my training. I recognized what it was and what I needed to do. I knew how to do it, and I did it, all without x-rays. No big deal, really, nothing to it. A week or two later, after returning home, I was thinking about Cynthia and wondered how she was doing. I thought how fortunate she was that an orthopedic surgeon had happened to be on that team, and how blessed I was to have been that surgeon. The closest hospital that could have treated her was 3 hours away, and her parents probably were not able to afford to take her there or able to get her there. Truthfully, there may have been no one else within 100 miles who had the training to do what was necessary. That is when it finally dawned on me. The Holy Spirit wanted me to be in Migori, Kenya, almost 8,000 miles from my home, on that day to help Cynthia. He is who asked, how about being a doctor? He is how I came to be a doctor. He is why I met Steve James. And he is the one who gave me a reason to say yes to going. There is not a doubt in my mind, not a doubt in my heart, not a doubt in my soul. I know it as sure as I'm standing here. Moses may have wandered in the desert for 40 years, but it took me 41 years to know God's plan for me. You know, God can be very, very patient. So what has changed since then? Well, for starters, I'm up here giving you this talk. But besides that, when someone tells me they are sick or will need surgery, I actually say to them, I will pray for you. That wasn't easy for me to do at first, It's a little thing, but my prayer list keeps growing. Susan and I now pray the rosary together almost every night. I read spiritual books more often, although I still haven't read Thomas Merton. I think he's over my head. But I have joined the Thursday morning Bible study here, and I try to go to Mass an extra time each week, usually at St. Martin's, and follow with Eucharistic adoration in their chapel for a little while. Now you may ask why at St. Martin's? Because there I can sit really, really close to the Eucharist. Finally, when I hear a bird sing, I think it might be the Father reminding me that he always hears me. Always. This is my journey of faith story. I hope at least one of you finds something that helps you. If you have any questions, please see Susan or me in the hospitality room. We love talking about our mission trips, and we can help you or someone you know go on one. It does not need to be medical, and I promise you, you won't regret it. Thank you for your time, and may the Holy Spirit bless you too.
Thank you, Paul. That was an amazing story, and just love to give you another round of applause for sharing your story with us. So thank you. I love how you remind us to, we pray often, and sometimes, I appreciate how you express that. Sometimes that frustration, we feel like maybe we're not being heard, but then just taking that time to actually listen and to see and to look for those God moments in our lives, like the bird singing, and to hear the Holy Spirit talking to you. So thank you for that, and thank you too for sharing the challenging part of your faith journey and how, I think sometimes it's easy when we get challenged. I mean, the faith community here let you down after that trip, and it would have been a shame to throw out the whole Catholic Church. So we're really glad that you all stay with us, and it was a lesson for us, and we appreciate you being here. And that you continue to go to Africa, and just the beautiful images of that. So thank you for that, those stories. So I hope you enjoyed this evening. Again, we still have our fellowship part where we get to hear a little bit more stories and talk with each other. Please mark your calendars for February 23rd. That will be our next CEO night. And we'll have Deacon Chuck will be sharing his story, his faith journey. So you can check the bulletin for further details on that as it gets closer, but please mark your calendar for that. Continue, please. Paul talked about prayer, and it's such a simple thing that we do, but it's so powerful. I love that image of that woman saying, I'm going to pray for you for the rest of my life. How wonderful that is. So please keep us in your prayers, the CEO, that this can continue to flourish here. I hope you have a wonderful break. We're purposefully waiting until February. There's a lot happening between now and February, so I get to wish you happy Thanksgiving and a blessed Advent, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. Did I just rush that whole season there real fast? But it'll be going by in a blink of an eye. I hope it's a blessed season for you all, and can't wait to see you in February. So until then, God bless you, and look forward to seeing you over in the hospitality room. Thank you all.